everyone, you're welcome back to Unique Sweet Ladies Place once again. My name is Yinka. In today's tutorial, I'm going to be showing us how to make this beautiful gown. For this tutorial, I use 1.5 yard for the plain material and I bought 1 yard for the collar and the sleeve cuff. So let's get started. So as you can see from the picture here, the gown is divided into 2 parts. We have the upper bodice, then we have the skirt block. So in today's class, I'm going to be showing us how to draft a princess dart upper bodice. That is the main aim and objective for this class. Though we're making this beautiful gown, but I want us to pay attention to how to draft a classic princess dart. So let's get into it. Here are the fabric I'm going to be using and my sewing equipments. So as first, I'm going to be folding my fabric into 2, as you can see here. The fabric is folded into 2. Then after that, I'm going to fold it over like this, leaving my zip allowance into 4. You can see it's folded into 4 now. This is my zip allowance, and I usually keep it at 1.5 inch. 1.5 inch for the zip allowance. So we are cutting the front and the back together. That's why the fabric is folded into 4. So the next thing I'm going to do is to roll my guideline. That's going to be my starting point. So after that, I'll measure the length of my armhole. I use 9 for my armhole. Then my shoulder to nipple is 10.5. I make a point at 10.5. Then my shoulder to waist length is 17. Then 1/2 inch for my seam allowance. Then I'm going to extend the lines. My nipple point, my waist length, and my 1/2 inch seam allowance. That is my shoulder line now. My chest line, your arm will give you your chest line. My shoulder to nipple, my waist length, and then my 1/2 inch seam allowance. That is the center front, and it's on fold. So on my guideline, I'm going to input my shoulder measurements. My shoulder is 16 divided by 2, that give me 8. I'll mark 8 inches. And I'll put that same 8 inches on my chest line so that you can rule that line straight. Then after that, I'm going to measure 3 inches neck width. And at the tip of the shoulder, I'm going to measure 1 inch. I believe we all know this now. Then I'll connect these points together so that I can get my shoulder slope. Then I'm going to add 1/2 inch to the shoulder slope for the seam allowance on the shoulder. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to place my French cuff so that I can get my back armhole cuff first. This is my back armhole. Then after that, I'll measure starting from the 1 inch shoulder drop. I'll locate the midpoint to the chest line like that, and I'll come in by 1/2 inch. From the midpoint to the shoulder tip, I'm going to roll it straight like so. Then after that, I'll place the cuffed part to get the front armhole cuff. So that's the front arm hook off, then the other one is the back arm hook off. All my measurement is going to start from this folded edge. Note. So on the chest line, I'm going to input my bust measurement divided by 4 plus 1.5 inch seam allowance. Then on the waistline, I'm going to put my waist measurement divided by 4 plus 1 inch dart, then plus 1.5 seam allowance. Then after that, I'm going to connect these points like so. So moving on now, the next thing is to introduce our dart. So on my nipple line, I'm going to input my nipple to nipple measurements. My nipple to nipple is 8 divided by 2, that give me 4. Then I'm going to add ½ inch seam allowance, so I'll measure 4.5. Then I'll measure that same 4.5 on my waistline. Then I'm going to roll it straight. So this is it now. Then the next thing is to locate the midpoint of our armhole, and we already have a point at the midpoint like so. So I'm going to roll it straight to the nipple position as well. We are making a classic princess dart. And if you remember, I added 1 inch for dart on the waistline, so I'm going to be marking my dart now. I'm going to be taking ½ inch dart on both sides of this line. And on the nipple position line, I'm going to come down by 1 inch. That's where my dart leg is going to stop. So just come down by 1 inch like so. Then you connect your dart legs together like so. So the next thing now is to take your dart on the armhole. On one side of the line, I'm going to take ½ inch dart downward like so. Just measure ½ inch downward like so. That's going to be the dart on the armhole. Just half. Then from the nipple position, you go up by 1 inch. Then you connect the darts. So we're making a classic princess dart. Hopefully next week I'm going to show us how to make a princess dart bustier. So that's it. Our dart is ready. The next thing you want to do now is just to place the cuff part of your French cuff to round the nipple like so. Can we see? So the next thing you want to do now is to extend the line of the second dart leg. You need to extend it. If not, by the time you're joining this together, they will not match properly. So you are going to extend this dart leg by 1.5 inch. Just like I'm showing you now. Extend it by 1.5 inch. Then after that, you draw your armhole cuff again. Just place your French cuff like I'm showing you now and connect it together. That is your new armhole cuff. And you are going to be cutting on this one now, not the former, but rather this new one that you drew. So we are done. So the next thing you want to do now is to determine your neckline. You can do any neckline of your choice. If you're not going for the style I'm illustrating today, you can decide to do any neckline you want now. But I'm just going to be measuring 1 inch down, just to note the position of the neck. That's all. I'm not cutting the neckline yet. For this style I'm making, I'm not cutting the neckline yet. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to reshape the zip allowance. It's very important so that the back zip can lay flat. So just like I'm showing you now, I'll enter in on the waistline by ½ inch, and then I'll connect it back like so. Can we see? This is just to prevent the zip from bulging at the back. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to cut it out. First I'll cut on the waistline, then after that I'll trim off the shoulder like so. Then I'll move to the armhole. I'll cut on the back armhole first. This is the back armhole. I'll cut on it first. Can we see? You can see that's the back armhole. Then this one here is the front armhole. I'm not going to be cutting on that yet. Then after that I'll trim off on the dart leg on the waistline. Like so. Hope we are following. Then after that I'm going to notch the zip allowance on the neckline and also the center of the front neck like so. Then after that I'll trim off the new zip allowance like that. So at this stage now you can redraw your zip allowance. You know we already trimmed ½ inch on the waistline on the zip allowance. The zip allowance is 1.5 inch, so you measure that same 1.5 on the waistline like so. So that is just the new zip allowance. Hope we are getting it. So then you roll it straight again. So if you are sewing your zip now, this is the line you are going to put the zip. Then you notch it on the waistline as well. So this is it. This is the setup panel in front, and then that is the back. So I'll keep this aside first, and then I'll finish off the cutting for the side panels. So next I'll cut on the dart leg, the second dart leg like so. Then I'm going to cut on the dart leg on the armhole as well. Then after that I'll cut on this new armhole. You see that I'm cutting on the new one and not the old one. Then I'll cut on the side. So this is the side panel, and at this stage you will have 4 pieces. So you take the first 2 and consider it's the back. You can see, take the first 2 like that, and you consider it as the back because you need to reshape this side on it. Then the last 2 you consider it as front, so I'm just going to write F. You can see it's 2 pieces, so I'll write F. That's the side panel for the front, so I'll keep it aside. Then I'll work on this one. So you're going to be reshaping that nipple position so that you don't have breast-like cuff at the back. So just trim off like about 1/4 inch on that your nipple position. Just enter in by like 1/4, thereabouts, you know, just to smoothen it in order not to have a deep curve on that part. Can we see? Just like that. Just trim it off just a little so that there will be no breast-like cuff at the back. You can see what I trim off is just a small thing, like about 1/4 inch, not up to half. You can see now. So this is for the back now, so you can write B so that you'll be able to differentiate it. So I'll grab the center panels again. This is the front for the center panel and it's unfold. So I'm going to reshape the armhole. You can see the armhole. I'll just reshape it like so. This is for the front. So this is the side panel for the front and this is the front now. The center panel is unfold, then we have two sides. So this is how it looks. So you need to wrap them together so that you don't miss it with the back. That's the front is ready. Then this is the back. We have two pieces for the center panel and then we have two pieces for the side. So this is the back. Can we see? So you wrap it together as well so that you don't mix them up. So moving on now, we are going to be cutting the skirt part of our gown. Like I always say, is a gown consists the upper bodice and also the skirt block. You can see this fabric is already folded into two. The fabric is folded into two. Then after that, I'll fold it over again into four, leaving my zip allowance of 1.5 inch. Then after that, I'm going to measure 1/2 inch for the seam allowance of the skirt block. I'm going to use this seam allowance to join this skirt to the upper bodice. So, and it's 1/2 inch. And all your measurement is going to start from the center front. The center front is unfold. So the next thing you want to do, my waist length is 17, so I'm going to place that 17 on this my line that I have here. Then from there I'll measure down the length of my gown. I'm making gown length of 42, then I'll add 2 inches seam allowance to it, making 44. So I will extend all these lines now. That is my actual length, and then this is my 2 inches seam allowance for the lower part of my gown. So you come back to the upper part here. This is your waistline. Then you input your waist measurement divided by 4 plus 1 inch dart plus 1 inch seam allowance. Note, we are using 1 inch seam allowance on this skirt block because it's not going to be into pieces like the upper bodice. So just use 1 inch seam allowance. Then from this waistline, I'll measure 8 inches downward for the hip line. This is just standard. You can decide to measure your hip line as an individual. So on the hip line, note all our measurement is starting from this folded edge. So on the hip line, I'm going to input the hip measurements divided by 4 plus 1 inch seam allowance. So the next thing you want to do now is to measure whatever you have on the hip line now. You put it on the hem of the skirt, but then you are going to be minusing 1.5 from it so that you can have pencil effect. So whatever you have on your hip line, place it on the hem of the gown and then you minus 1.5. Then you're going to use the cuff part of your French cuff to connect the hip to the waist. Then from the hip, you roll it straight to the hem, like so. If you don't want it to be pencil, from this hip line, you can just roll it straight down to the hem of the skirt. So this is it. So the next thing I want to do now is to redraw the side seam of the front, because I don't want the front of the skirt to have a dart. So I had it 1 inch dart, so I'm going to just connect it like this, because later I'm going to be trimming this 1 inch off from the front of the skirt. I don't want the front of the skirt to have a dart. That is 1 inch dart that I already redraw like so. So the next thing you want to do now is to notch the zip allowance on also the center front of the skirt. So I'm going to cut it out now. Then I'm going to cut on the side seam. So when you're about to get to the hem, you are going to fold your seam allowance upward like I'm showing you now, and then you trim it like so. So this is it. So the next thing now is to measure your slit length, that is the back vent, the back slit. So you measure 6 inches upward from the hem of the skirt like so. That is where the slit is going to start from. So you're going to sew from the zip allowance out to that point. So this is my zip allowance. My zip allowance is 1.5 inch. I'm going to roll my zip allowance straight down to my slit position. So that's when I'm sewing my zip, I will know the line to follow. That's the essence of this line. It's not really necessary. So I'm going to be inputting my darts now. Starting from this line that I roll, I will measure 4 inches inward. This 4 inches is just your nipple to nipple distance divided by 2. And the length of the dart is going to be 6 inches for the back. The back dart leg, the length is going to be 6 inches like so. Then on both sides of this line that I roll now, I'm going to measure 1/2 inch on both sides, and then I'll connect it to the 6 inches point. So this is the back dart for the skirt, and then you transfer the same dart to the other side of the skirt like so. Note we are working on the back of this skirt. So when you're done transferring the dart, you turn it, and then you connect your points together. So that's it, we're done with the back. You can keep it aside. So you grab the front again. So if you're putting that on your own skirt block, starting from the center, you measure your nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. Then you come down by 4.5 inches. Then you roll it straight. Then on both sides of this line, you're going to measure 1/2 inch on both sides. Just measure 1/2 inch on both sides of this line and connect it back to the 4.5 points. So when you're done, you transfer it to the other side as well. Then you turn it, and then you connect the darts together like so. So if you're putting that on yours, this is how to go about it. But for mine, I'm not going to be putting that. And you know I already added 1 inch for the dart on the block already, so I'm going to trim that 1 inch out because I don't want that on the front skirts. So I'll cancel the dart. There's no dart now on the skirts in front now. There's no dart. So moving on, we are going to be cutting the sleeve. Place your fabric into 2, then you fold it into 4. The fabric is into 4 folds now. So the next I'm going to do is to measure the length of the sleeve. For the upper part of the sleeve, I use 17 inches, so I'll measure the 17 inches. Then my cap height is 5 inch. I'll measure it as well. Then I'll extend the line. This is the length. This is my cap height of 5 inch. So on my cap height line, I'm going to measure my armhole measurements with my allowance. Then after that, I'll get my armhole cuff like so. Then At the hem of the sleeve, I'm going to input my round sleeve measurements divided by 2, then plus my allowance. Then I'm going to connect these points together. Then after that, I'm going to cut it out. We are going to be sewing our gown now. I'm starting off with the front. So this is the skirt for the front, and then this is the bodice for the front. So I'll keep the skirt aside first. This is the center panel for the front. You open it. I've opened mine now. You can see. And then this is the side. We have 2 sides. So the next thing is to take the center panel, turn it to the right side. Then you take one side and then you match them right side to right side. And then you start sewing. You start from the waistline. Start joining it together from the waistline, not the armhole, but the waistline. So when you're done joining it together, this is how it looks. You're going to join the other side as well. Place it right side to right side and then you stitch. Note you're going to join them together with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So this is it. The next thing now is to get the skirt of the front. If you are putting that, this is the stage to sew in your dart, but you know I'm not putting that in my own front skirt. So this is it. So I'm going to be attaching the skirt to the upper part now. So if you're sewing in that, this is just hold it together and then you stitch it down. But I'm not putting that like I said. So you're going to join the skirts to the bodice now, and you're going to be joining it together with 1/2 inch. So place the front skirt and the front bodice together, right side facing each other. Make sure the center notch and line. Then you join it together with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So the next thing now is just to notch the darts. Just notch the darts, just put small cut on the dart so that by the time you iron it, it can relax very well. That's the essence of this small cut you're making on the darts. So moving on now, we'll be joining the back panels together as well. So this is the skirt. This is the skirt part for the back, and then this is the upper bodice. This is the upper bodice. You are going to keep the skirt aside first so that you can work on the upper bodice. So this is the center panel and it's into 2 pieces because it's going to have a zip. Then the sides is into 2 as well. So you're going to match right side to right side like you did to the front, and then you're going to stitch it down with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So when you're done with one side, you take the other side and then you do the same thing. You join them together. So this is it. So I'm done joining them together. So the next thing you want to do now is to place them on top of each other, right side to right side. Mash them together. Let everything align properly. Then the next thing you want to do is to measure 0.75 on the waistline on the zip allowance part. Then from there, you're going to connect it to the side seam. You're going to be connecting it to the side seam like so. Then after that, you trim it off. This is just to allow the back to sit very well. All these little steps matters in sewing. So you just trim it off. By the time you finish sewing your dress, the back will balance well. So you keep that aside and then you work on the skirt part of the back. So you're going to be sewing in your dart. That's the first step on the skirt. You first join your dart. So after joining it together, this is how it looks. So you can see your dart, it comes from the armhole all the way down and it's on the same line. So you keep that aside and then you work on the other side as well. Align them together, right side facing each other, and then you stitch together with 1/2 inch. So don't forget to notch the dart as well on the upper bodice. Just notch the dart. Don't notch the one on the skirts. So the next thing now is to iron your dress. You need to iron the dart, open the dart and then you iron it using your tailor's arm. So when you're done ironing and everything is flat, so the next thing you want to do is to take the two back panels, match them on top of each other, right side facing each other. Let it align properly. Then starting from the waistline, this is the waistline here, you measure 8 inches downward. That is where the zip is going to stop. So from this point now, on your zip allowance, you stitch it down to where you have the shocking for the back slit. You know, we make a point at the place we want the slit to start from. So starting from this point now, you stitch it down all the way to the starting point of the slit. Make sure as you sew, everything is on the same line. Then when you get to the position where your slit is going to start from, you put the needle down and then you pivot your dress and then you sew it like so. So by the time you open it up, this is how it looks. This is how it looks. So the next thing you want to do now is to top stitch on top of it. You can see you top stitch under your zip allowance like this. The reason for this little top stitch is for the slit to stay in place. So that's it. We are done with the back slit. And this is how it looks from the inside. So the next thing you want to do now is to place them back on top of each other, right side to right side. Then you change the dowel of your machine to the longest stitch so that you can sew a loose stitch on your zip allowance, so that you can keep it in place pending the time you will cut the neckline. So by the time you open it up, this is it. So the right side is facing up. You are going to take the front. The right side of the front will be facing the right side of the back. So align the shoulders together, right side facing each other, and then you are going to join the shoulder with 1/2 inch seam allowance. So we are going to be shaping the neckline now. I've turned the fabric to the right side. You can see I've turned it to the right side, then I iron it flat. So starting from the tip of the shoulder on the right hand side, I'll measure 2.5 inches inward. 2.5 inches, I'll measure it inward like so. Then from the highest point of the shoulder, I'm going to measure 3.5 inches downward. 3.5 from the highest point of the shoulder like so. Then at the other shoulder, I'm going to measure 5 inches downward. This is the off shoulder part. I'm going to measure 5 inches. Then I'll use my French cuff to connect everything together. Then after that, I'm going to cut it out. So this is it. One side is off shoulder. So the next thing you want to do now, on the part that is off shoulder, you go inside like that by 1 inch. Go inward by 1 inch. This is for the dress to balance well on this off shoulder part later on when you're done making the dress. Then you connect it back to the armhole, and then you're going to trim this 1 inch off just on the front part alone, not with the back, but just the front part of it. So the next thing now is to take the sleeve. You know, we have 2 sleeves. You take one and put it aside. That's going to be for the part that is with the shoulder. Then you take the second one, fold it back nicely. Then you match the armhole together like that. Match the armhole together like that. And then you use it to trace the armhole of the bodice like so. Then you make a point at where the off shoulder part stops. Can you see? Just make your mark on the part that the off shoulder stops. This is the armhole. Place the sleeve on it. You can see where the armhole stop on the sleeve as well. So place the armhole together like this, and then you mark the position where the off shoulder part stop on the sleeve. Then from that place now you roll it, either you roll it straight or you curve it, but I'm going to be curving mine. Just place the curve part of the roller and curve it. You can still roll it straight, it's the same thing. Anyone you choose to do, both are okay. So then after that, you are going to trim this part off. You no longer need it. So this is for the off shoulder sleeve now. So by the time you place them together, it's going to look like this. Can you see? So moving on, this is our cutout. This is the neck part. So you turn the fabric to the wrong side and then you'll be working with the back part of it first. So from the top on the zip allowance part, you measure 2 inches downward. Then you are going to stitch from the top to that 2 inches point. That is where your zip is going to start. Your zip is not going to start exactly at the top, rather it's starting 2 inches below, like so. So the next thing is just to pull the loose stitch you have on the zip allowance. You know, remember that loose stitch that we did on the zip allowance? So just take it off so that you can fix your zip now. Like I said, the zip is starting 2 inches below the neckline and is stopping 8 inches downward from the waistline. So this opening here is our zip allowance part now. We're going to be inserting our zip there. So turn the dress to the wrong side. This is the wrong side of the back. Then you take your zip. The right side of the zip is going to be facing down. The right side of the zip is facing down, like so. Then you match it together with the zip allowance, and then you are going to open the zip. Match them together like I'm showing you, and then you are going to stitch the zip to the zip allowance all the way down. Then when you are done, you zip it back up and then you turn the dress upside down. Then you start sewing the zip from the down this time around. You start stitching the zip together with the dress from the down parts now. So this is it. I'm done attaching the zipper to the dress. This is how it's looking. You can see your zip. So the next thing I'll do now is to join the shoulder very well. The shoulder is already joined, but you know we cut the neckline afterwards. So I'm going to restitch the shoulder. So this is my dress, and then the next thing now is to attach the sleeve. This is one sleeve, the one that is not off shoulder, and this is the second sleeve, the one that is off shoulder. You can see, you can spot the difference. So I'm going to be attaching the off shoulder part first. So I'll match the right side of the sleeve to the right side of the front, and then I'm going to stitch them together on the armhole. I'm going to stitch with 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then after that, I'll turn it to the other side, and then I will attach the sleeve to the back part of the off shoulder side as well. Match them together right side to right side, and then you stitch with 1/2 inch seam allowance again. So I'm done attaching the off shoulder sleeve, and then this is how it's looking. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to attach the sleeve to the one with shoulder. So I'll match the center notch of the sleeve with the shoulder seam on the body, right side to right side, and then I'm going to stitch together with 1/2 inch seam allowance. I'll stitch it to the armhole. So when you're done stitching it on one side, you turn it to the other side. This time around, the bodice will be on top and the sleeve will be at the bottom, and then you stitch it again to the other side. So I'm done attaching the sleeves. So this is how our dress is looking. This is our progress so far. So this is the shoulder, and then this is the off shoulder part. I'm going to notch the midpoint of the sleeve on the off shoulder part like so. Then from this point now, from this my notching now, I'm going to measure the neckline all around till I get back to this notching. You measure around the neckline like that all around till you get back to the notch again. So after measuring mine, I got 39 inches. So I'll keep the dress aside, then I'm going to work on the collar. So I'm going to be folding my fabric diagonally like so, like a triangle. Then after that, I'm going to confirm whether I have up to my neck measurements. When I measure the neck, I got 39. Then I'm going to add 1 inch for allowance on it, making 40. So I'll first ensure I have up to 40 like so, just like I'm showing you now. Then after that, I'm going to measure 5.5 inches all around. That's going to be the width of the collar unfold. 5.5. Just measure 5.5 all around. Then after that, you roll it into a straight line. Then starting from the beginning here like this, you're going to measure the length of the neckline. The neckline is 39 plus 1 allowance, making 40. I'll measure the 40 like so. Then I'll make a point. Then after that, I'll cut it out, starting from the beginning of the triangle here. That's where you're going to start your cutting from. You cut from there like so. So when you're about to get to the 40 inches mark that you made earlier, you're going to stop so that you can align the wing together. So you're going to stop like that. This is my 40 inches mark there. I'm going to take this part I already cut out, the beginning part of it. I will mash it on top of my 40 inches mark like so. This is it. I hope we can see it well. The essence of this is just for the wing to be equal. So then I'm going to now cut it so that the wing of the two sides can be the same. So this is our collar. You can see the wings are the same. So I'm going to notch the middle like that. So if you open it completely, this is how it looks. So the next thing you want to do now is to fuse your stay on it. So you can see the collar is already on the wrong side, so I'll place my stay on top of it and I'm going to iron it down. What I'm going to be doing now is to cut the lower part of my sleeve. So first I'll place my fabric into 2 folds. After that, I'll fold it over again into 4. So my fabric is folded into 4 now. So the next thing I'm going to do is to fold it downward. By the time I fold it downward like this, it will be into 8 folds. Then after that, I'll measure 6 inches upward, because after sewing this lower part, I want this part to be 5.5 inches. So I'll measure 6 inches upward and I'll roll it like that. Then after that, I'll take my sleeve. This is the sleeve of my dress. I'll fold it into 2 like this. Then I'll place it on top of this, my 6 inches. Can you see? I'll place them on top of each other. Then I'll make a point where the sleeve stops. Then at this lower part, I'll measure my round sleeve measurement here. Whatever I have, I'll divide it into 2. I'll make a point. Then I'm going to add my seam allowance to that. I'm adding 1 inch seam allowance. Then after that, I'll connect it together. Then I'm going to cut it out. Then after that, I'll notch the center like that. Then by the time you open it, this is how it looks. Can you see? So if you open it completely, this is how it looks. You have 2 pieces like so. So one is going to be for each of the sleeves. So moving on now, we are going to be attaching the sleeve, the lower part of the sleeve to the main part. So just place them on top of each other like that, and then you stitch with 1/2 inch seam allowance. You can see the lower part is on fold. Just place them on top of each other like that, and then you stitch. So when you're done attaching it together, this is how it looks. Make sure you do the same thing to the other sleeve. Join the remaining together like that. So moving on to the collar, this is our collar. You open it up at one side, then you are going to stitch the edge together with 1/2 inch seam allowance, just the way I'm showing you. Then after that, you turn it back to the right side like this. Then you do the same thing to the other side. turn it to the wrong side, and then you stitch the edge together with 1/2 inch seam allowance. After that, bring it back to the right side. You may need to use something sharp to push the edge outside very well so that it can be pointing. So this is it. The next thing you want to do now is to attach the collar to the neckline. So this is the neckline. This is how the neckline is looking. So the next thing you want to do now is to grab your collar, fold it together into two like this, and then you notch the center. You can see the way it's looking. If you have not notched the center before, just notch it at this stage. Then you match this, your center notching, with the shoulder joining. You know, one side is with shoulder and then the other side is off shoulder. So this is the, okay, can you see very well now? This is the shoulder joining, this is the one with shoulder. So you match the center notch of the collar with the shoulder joining, and then you pin it. Then you pin it all the way till you get to the off shoulder part, the sleeve of the off shoulder part, the midway of it. You know, we have notching there as well. Okay, so this is the off shoulder part, the midway of the sleeve. I'll pin it as well. You can see. Then the other side again, pin it again till you get back to the notching on the off shoulder sleeve as well. I hope we are getting it. And we are pinning it on the right side of the dress. We are pinning it on the right side of the dress. So at every point in time, you need to be accurate with whatever thing you're doing. You can see how this collar matches well with the neckline. It's exactly the neckline. So you pin it again as well. Well, if it passes, you may need to readjust your collar and sew it more. But just try to be accurate with it so that you don't go through the stress of loosening and readjusting. You know what I mean? Okay, so that's it. The next thing now is to stitch it down. You stitch the collar to the bodice. So when you're done stitching the collar to the bodice, the next thing is to finish the neckline with a bias strip. This way the raw edge of the collar and the raw edge of the bodice will be concealed nicely. So this is it. You can see the collar. The collar is directly on top of the bodice of the dress, on the right side of the bodice exactly. So what you're going to do is just to place your bias, starting from the off shoulder parts. I'm going to place the bias on top of the collar, and then I'm going to stitch the bias all around the neckline. Then after that, you are going to top stitch the bias to the body of the dress. Just look at the way I'm doing it. Open it up like this, then bend the bias downward to the bodice of the dress on the wrong side like this, and then you are going to top stitch the bias on top of the wrong side of the dress, just like I'm showing you. I believe it's visible enough, but if you have any question, you can just leave your question in the comment section. I'll be there to reply your question. All right, so this is the collar. The next thing you want to do now is to turn the dress to the wrong side, and then you are going to close the sides. You are going to close the side with 1-inch seam allowance, starting from the sleeve all the way to the bodice, then all the way to the hem of the dress. Then when you're done with one side, you repeat the same thing to the other side. Then after that, you're going to hem the lower part of your dress. So just first fold it once, then you fold it over again, and then you stitch it. We added 2 inches seam allowance to the lower part, so you're going to make sure you fold 1 inch inward, then you fold it over again, and then you stitch. And that's it, your dress is ready. Bye.